Welcome to the second podcast. In this podcast, I will give you a short introduction as well as a first insight of what is consumer theory. In particular, the concepts we will deal with are the following: the budget constraints, the budget line, and the economic interpretation of the slope of the budget line. Two different types of agents are worth mentioning before starting, and they will be the focus of economic theory. First, consumers have the objective to maximize their satisfaction. We call it utility in economic words. So they maximize their satisfaction or their utility from the consumption of different goods. They are therefore always looking for the goods and services they prefer at the lowest price possible. Second, producers have the objective to maximize their profits, and therefore they are continuously looking for profitable markets while minimizing the cost of producing goods and services. At the end of all the podcasts related to basic economic concepts, you will be able to understand the following diagram, which is widely used in economics. This is the demand and supply diagram. While the demand captures the behavior of consumers, the supply captures the behavior of producers. Consider a consumption good such as chocolate bars. The price of a chocolate bar is depicted on the vertical axis, while the quantity of chocolate bars is depicted on the horizontal axis. As you can see, the demand curve is a downward sloping curve, whereas the supply curve is upward sloping. Why is it the case? First, think of you as a consumer, which means that you want to buy chocolate bars. When the price of one chocolate bar is high, you will probably not buy a large quantity of bars. But when the price is low, you may buy higher quantities of chocolate bars. Now, think of you as a producer, which means that you produce and sell chocolate bars on the market. If the market price is low, you're not willing to produce large quantities of chocolate bars because you don't get a lot of profit at such a price. However, if the price is high, you are interested in producing and selling a lot of bars on the market. The intersection of these two curves is a point of interest. It determines what we call the market equilibrium. This intersection point gives you the equilibrium price on the market and the equilibrium quantity supplied and consumed of the goods, here chocolate bars. This is an efficient or optimal point. Again, this diagram gathers two parts of economic theory. First, deriving the demand curve belongs to consumer theory, and it asks the question, how do consumers make choices? This is about consumer behavior. Second, deriving the supply curve belongs to producer theory, and it asks the question, how do producers make choices? And this is about producer behavior. Once we have derived demand and supply curves, the main questions economists are interested in are the following. How do markets work? Do they always achieve the best outcome? Best is employed in the sense of the most efficient. We will see this concept in another podcast. Sometimes markets do not provide the efficient outcome, and this is what we will call a market failure. So if there is a market failure, what can we do? Is there a role for the government to intervene in the market? If so, which instruments can be used to correct for market failures? Of course, the material and methods presented here are a simplification of reality, like in many other scientific disciplines. But models are there to help you think about the world and about how it functions. So once you understand the simple model, you can always extend, sophisticate, and complexify it with other interesting features. Let's turn to consumer theory. As I already mentioned, consumer theory aims at examining consumer behavior. In order to understand how consumers make decisions, we rely on two major concepts: the budget constraints, that we will explain in this podcast, and consumer preferences, which will be explained in the following podcasts. The budget constraint consists of all combinations of goods and services that a consumer can afford. Note that we will call indifferently these combinations consumption bundles or consumption baskets throughout the podcasts. Now, assume that there are two goods, strawberries and oranges. And consider a consumer whose name is Jenny. Jenny has a budget of 100 kronas, and she can buy either strawberries for 10 kronas per kilo or oranges for 5 kronas per kilo. So strawberries are twice as costly as oranges here. Now let's analyze some examples. Consider the bundle containing 4 kilos of strawberries and 10 kilos of oranges. How much does Jenny have to pay for this consumption basket? Well, she has to pay 4 kilos of strawberries multiplied by 10, the price of strawberries per kilo, plus the same thing for oranges, 10 kilos multiplied by 5 kronas, which gives a total of 90 kronas. Now we compare what she has to pay with her budget, which is 100 kronas. And since 90 is lower than 100, we can say that this basket is affordable for Jenny because it is within the budget constraints. Another example. Now the basket contains 10 kilos of strawberries and 5 kilos of oranges. The amount that Jenny has to pay for this basket is 10 kronas multiplied by 10 kilos plus 5 kronas multiplied by 5 kilos. And this leads to a total amount of 125 kronas. This amount this time is higher than what Jenny can afford, 100 kronas. So this basket is not affordable. It's not within the budget constraints. As you saw, the budget constraint depends on two things: the income, that we will denote by I, and the prices of goods 1 and 2, that we denote by P1 and P2. We can now give the formal definition of the budget constraint. Given any I, P1 and P2, the budget constraint is the set of all consumption bundles, X1 and X2, which satisfies the following inequality. P1 times X1 plus P2 times X2 is smaller than I, the income. This simply means that your expenditures are smaller than your income, which is intuitive. They are weakly smaller here. And the budget line is the set of all consumption baskets, X1, X2, that a consumer can afford spending all income so that it satisfies the equality P1 times X1 plus P2 times X2 is equal to I. Now let's illustrate these concepts graphically. So we are going to draw the budget line and represent the budget constraint in this diagram, where X1 is on the horizontal axis and X2 on the vertical axis. We only need 2 points to draw this budget line. So if Jenny spends all her income in strawberries, for example, we can easily find the quantity she can buy given her income and the price of strawberries. This is actually her income divided by the price of strawberries. So I divided by P1, which is equal to 10 here. So that gives you point A on the budget line. Another point now If Jenny spends all her income in oranges now instead, that means that the quantity she can buy is 100 divided by 5, which gives her 20 kilos of oranges. And we get point B, a second point, on the budget line. So we can now draw the budget line. All consumption baskets on this line exhaust Jenny's income. And the budget constraints is represented by all the consumption bundles that Jenny can afford. So this includes both the bundles on the budget line, when all income is spent, and the bundles below the budget line. So the budget line illustrates the trade-off Jenny is facing. She can either buy only strawberries or only oranges, or a combination of both goods. The budget line satisfies the fact that all income is spent in consumption, as I just mentioned. And as it is drawn in the x1, x2 diagram, we need to write x2 as a function of x1 to obtain the budget line equation. So by rearranging the previous equation, we get that x2 is equal to income over p2 minus p1 over p2 times x1. Thus, as you can see, this is a linear function. So the slope of the budget line here is minus the price ratio, p1 over p2. What is the economic interpretation of the slope of this budget line, minus p1 over p2? So let's start with a graph. Imagine Jenny initially has 5 kilos of strawberries and 10 kilos of oranges, which is represented by point C on the graph. So this bundle is on the budget line because all her income is spent on consumption of strawberries and oranges. So if she wants to buy 1 more kilo of strawberries, how many kilos of oranges does she have to forego given her budget constraints? Since 1 kilo of strawberries costs 10 kronas and 1 kilo of oranges costs 5 kronas, then Jenny has to give up twice as much kilos of oranges, twice as many, sorry. So she has to give up 2 kilos of oranges. And this corresponds to the price ratio P1 over P2. So now, if we do the reverse, so that the initial bundle contains 6 kilos of strawberries and 8 kilos of oranges. To buy 2 more kilos of oranges, how many kilos of strawberries does Jenny have to sacrifice? 1 kilo of strawberries has to be given up. So to the general question, how many units of good 2 must a consumer give up in order to obtain 1 more unit of good 1? The answer is P1 over P2. And the reverse holds. How many units of good 2 can a consumer obtain by giving up 1 more unit of good 1? Then the answer is P1 over P2 as well. To sum up this podcast, we have seen that the 2 agents economists focus on are consumers and producers. We started exploring consumer theory, which relies on 2 main concepts: the budget constraints and consumer preferences. In this first podcast, we went through the budget constraints and we explained what is a budget line and what is the economic interpretation of its slope. In the 2 following podcasts, we will start exploring what consumer preferences are, which boils down to addressing the following 2 questions. Which consumption bundle does Jenny want to consume? And how can we describe her preferences?